They say in the old villages of the East, the dead don't rest. Not because they won't, but because they were never really gone. In those places, the soil remembers. The stone remembers. Every superstition whispered at the fireside was a kind of prayer or warning. Tonight, we follow those warnings. Through forgotten graves, flickering candles, and a thin line between folklore and something that still moves beneath it. Welcome, murderers. Today we talk about vampires.
There is a medicine story that tells of Crow's fascination with her own shadow. She kept looking at it, pecking at it until her shadow woke up and became alive. Then Crow's shadow ate her. Crow is dead Crow now. Join us as we attempt to look through the wandering crow's eye to find the gateway to the supernatural, to seek to know the unknowable mysteries of creation. Welcome to the Wandering Crow Podcast.
Welcome back, murderers. Today is the Wandering Crow Podcast with Cameron.
I'm Mandy.
This is Abby.
This is JT.
And today we are talking about vampires. But first, social media.
Indeed. Hey, murderers, if you like the cut of our jib, please subscribe to our channel and leave a 5-star review through whichever platform you stream our episodes. If you'd like to help us grow, then please download, like, share, and comment on our episodes. If you have any feedback or paranormal stories you'd like to hear featured on an episode, you can contact us a number of ways. We have an email, a Facebook, an Instagram, a website, and even a phone number. Links to all of those are always shared in the episode description. Now, without further delay, back to the episode.
Growing up, there hasn't been too many creatures that have been romanticized as much as vampires, and I always found them very interesting. And then I started to learn about the real world vampire legends. And many of them didn't even drink blood. They persisted on life force. I always thought it was very interesting. And I wanted to discuss some of those vampires today. Anyone else?
It's been such a weird full circle for me, because to come from a place where I felt like all vampires drank blood, and then to hear about things like energy vampires and think, well, this is a stupid hippie notion. And then to actually hear about some of the history and be like, oh, this is actually much older than I thought. It's kind of neat. And so I'm glad that we're talking about this subject.
Yeah, man.
Abby's impersonation of a hippie.
She's got myth crystals.
Obviously, we all know the Interview with the Vampire,
so good.
Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Twilight, the Lost Boys. We all know the hunky, good-looking vampires that we want to turn us. And so I love it as a horror genre. It's pretty intriguing to research as something people take seriously. That's what I'll say about that.
Mm-hmm.
JT?
Well, I mean, I think that in this day and age, people have kind of lost the classic 80s blah, blah, I want to suck your blood, which was actually from one of the first Dracula films from 1931.
Was it Nosferatu?
It was Bela Lugosi in the film Dracula, directed by Todd Browning, who first coined that phrase. Or, there's always the Count from Sesame Street.
Oh, yeah!
You know what's sad is I don't think that was any of our first introductions to vampires.
No.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, probably not. We probably heard about the scary kind before.
Yeah. You guys even brought up how in the X-Files they have to throw rice or something to distract the...
Yes.
You guys mentioned in the first vampire episode something about vampires allegedly being obsessed with counting, and as I was listening I was like, damn it, they missed an opportunity to talk about the Sesame Street count. So good job, JT. You went there.
Very good.
I had to go there.
That's also why I wanted to revisit it, because we didn't have the other two.
Yeah, true. That's true. And we're going to have some good insights this time. Well, on social media, there's this thing called the Hoa 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 season. Do you guys know what that is?
No.
There's a whole community of people who develop memes about Twilight and how just absolutely terrible it is and how much they love it because they love it. And that is where I think the mind is centered mostly these days, is that kind of vampire idea. But even that has its roots.
I did visit Forks, Washington.
Oh, you did? We almost went to Forks while we were in Seattle. How was it?
You know, I went to the Push.
JT shook his head
because
no.
of the movie.
Body language said everything.
I mean,
the body language was definitive.
We went to a restaurant, and there was a thing on the side of the restaurant that was like, you know how you have in Arizona here the fire danger meter?
Yeah.
They had the vampire danger meter.
Fantastic. Of course.
How cute.
So, but yeah, I went to Forks just because of Twilight.
I think that's an excellent segue from Twilight to the people who want to kill vampires.
Yes. Oh, and you know what? We should have a whole episode about vampire killers for sure. But from the happy-go-lucky fun, I want to start you off with something just absolutely horrible. And I want to start it with this picture of this bro.
Okay, so he's not a bro.
He is not a bro.
He's not really a bro, everybody.
Yeah, he's a bro.
This guy is something special. His name is John Crutchley, John Brennan Crutchley. Look at that freaking face.
He's got that 1,000-mile stare.
Yeah. He looks like he's been through some shit. This dude's been through Nam and back, man. But he didn't. This guy is disgusting. He is a lunatic. Attention, wanderers and murderers. This is an official trigger warning. The following content includes some descriptions of the violent assault of a young woman, consumption of human blood, cannibalism, and harm to animals. If these are things that you would not like to hear about, please skip forward to minute marker 17. On the evening of November 22nd in 1985 in Florida, a nude teenage girl who was later identified as a 19-year-old Laura Murphy was found crawling along the side of the road. She was handcuffed at both her feet and ankles. She had been passed by several trucks before a motorist finally stopped to help her. She begged the motorist not to take her back, quote unquote, to that house. By the time she got to the hospital, it was determined she was missing between 40 to 45% of her total blood volume.
Whoa. How was she still moving?
Exactly. She was a survivor. She was a badass. She had ligature marks around her neck, and it had been clear that she had really been through some things. The story goes that she'd been hitchhiking the day before, and she claimed that this guy Crutchley had picked her up and he was willing to take her where she needed to go, which was a nearby city in Florida. But he said, real quick before we do that, I got to stop off at home and I got to pick up this notebook that I need for work, and then we can take you wherever you need to go. And she was like, yeah, cool. Thanks, man. So once in his driveway, he invited her in. She refused. That's when he first tied a ligature around her neck, choked her into unconsciousness, and dragged her into his house where he chained her up. Once she was there, he took off her clothes, and she woke up naked with her arms and legs immobilized. There was a video camera set up along with some lights, and then he started assaulting her. I won't be more clear than that, but it was not good. He assaulted her, and then he started to insert needles into her arms and wrists to extract her blood, and right in front of her, he started to drink it, and he said to her, I need it, I'm a vampire. Afterwards, he handcuffed her, put her in the bathtub, and he came back for several more rounds of the same thing, of the assault followed by the blood extraction. She had a total of 3 rounds of that treatment from him. When finally he left her in the bathroom saying that he'd be back later, and he basically told her, like, guess what? This is going to keep going. I'll be back. If you try to escape, I'm going to kill you. Or, well, he said his brother would come kill her. He left the house, and she was just like, hell no, I'm not going to die this way. And she escaped by crawling out of the bathroom window. According to Wikipedia, a hematologist later stated that she would have died of blood loss within about 12 hours if she hadn't gotten out of there, regardless of whether he took more or not, because that's just how depleted she was. Here's the crazy thing. He's a really super smart dude. He was married. He had a kid. She was kind of a big deal. I feel like she was an engineer or something working for NASA. He was a computer IT guy. He was like a really smart guy. And this is just what he had been doing. He is suspected of assaulting, exsanguinating, and murdering as many as maybe 30 women.
Wow.
That he's a smart bastard, and he only admitted to the things that they could prove. And so he did have some of their driver's licenses and some other keepsakes that he kept that they were able to tie to some specific women. So he was actually charged with only a smaller number of murders than probably he actually did. So he's just this horrible, disgusting human being. And when I saw the picture of him, I was like, holy shit, like he's a dude who actually kind of looks like a freaking vampire. Like he looks extremely unwell. And apparently he was pretty much only subsisting on blood by the time that he was caught.
You know what he looks like? He looks like Nosferatu.
Yeah.
But with hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he does.
Yeah. He sure does. Well, he looks
does.
like he's probably, not eating food.
To clarify, I didn't read the parentheses. That's why I thought that was a great transition. I thought you meant people that wanted to kill vampires.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I thought Twilight was a good setup for that.
Because you want to kill those vampires?
I did not realize. Parentheses, people who are vampires and kill people. Oh.
Yeah, we're not talking about vampire hunters right now. Anyway, so this guy, he died in prison. He had actually gotten released on probation. He was supposed to have 25 to life. And then he was released 2 years earlier than he was actually supposed to. He had served 11 years and he was released for good behavior.
No.
That's first-degree murder.
Yeah.
This rapist and murderer was released for good behavior.
Of multiple women.
Multiple women. In Florida.
I can't believe that.
I do. Florida's a terrible place.
Yeah, but I thought they were all about like the death penalty and stuff there.
Not about rape, though. I don't think they care about
You
that.
behave. Get out of here, you little scamp.
Right.
You were so good, you scamp. Don't go drinking blood anymore. Don't murder those women. About a day later, he was arrested because he violated his parole because he tested positive for marijuana. So I think that...
Okay, that'll land him back in jail.
I think the legal system failed, but I think that there were some people like police and stuff with long memories who were watching this son of a bitch and were like,
get him back in there.
Any chance, we're going to get him back in there.
Yeah.
All right, so that was why they landed the weed charge, just because they needed something.
They needed something, and I think they found it, and that was enough. So he ended up back in jail, and then he died in 2002, found dead in his cell with a plastic bag over his head. There was a declaration made that it was probably an autoerotic thing that he had done, and he accidentally killed himself.
Tracks.
Yeah, it seems like fitting for him. So I wanted to talk about that freaking dude. He legit was drinking people's blood, and he was a horrible, disgusting human being, and he looks pathetic. And it's hard to believe such a scrawny, sickly looking person could have been capable of all of that. But man, it's like crazy. There's a very long list, in fact, of different people, some older, some fairly recent throughout history, who have been identified as being vampire killers. So there's one, Rod Farrell. He was a teenager in the 80s. His is a really interesting story, and I had listened to it on another podcast called Morbid. And he was just a messed up kid. He had a pretty messed up past. He had a lot of parental issues. He was abused and abandoned in some ways. And he actually was introduced to a vampire cult, I'm saying that in parentheses, of a group of other teenagers, like kind of just goth kids, who believed that they were vampires. They were actually nice people. They were not killers. They were good, fairly well-adjusted kids who were just doing like their role play thing or whatever, who kind of took this kid under their wing because they saw that he was wounded and injured, and they accepted him into their group. But he started challenging them, and he started pushing for weirder and stranger behavior. Apparently, he murdered a kitten in front of the leader of that group, and that guy was like, nope, this is not who we are. We're not violent. We're not doing this. That was terrible. You need help. And by the way, I think you can't be part of this group anymore. At that point, Rod Farrell kind of started his own group and had this on again, off again girlfriend who also thought she was a vampire. And they conspired to kill her parents because she was mad at some of the boundaries that they were placing on her and trying to get her to be a well-adjusted kid. Glossing over quite a few details, but essentially they kill these parents and then they're arrested. So he only killed the one, but he genuinely believed he was like a 400-year-old vampire. There's a bunch of others. Manuela Bartel and Daniel Ruda. That's actually a really terrible story. Those two got married to each other and then decided that they had a contract with Satan and that Satan had told them that in order to usher in the beginning of a new world order and to get their seats in hell as these archdemons and be vaunted or whatever in hell, whatever weird fantasy they had believed, they had to kill somebody and eat him. And so they picked a friend and then they murdered him. But then they were supposed to kill each other afterwards so that they could actually go to hell and get the reward that they were entitled to. And for one reason or another, that didn't end up happening and they fled the scene, obviously. So they were later caught and went to prison, and she's been rehabilitated. Supposedly she's free, and he, Daniel Ruda, is still in prison, and because he has exhibited zero remorse at all, ever, for what he did. He still doesn't care. So he never, ever gets parole. Auguste Delagrange, 1900s, also a serial killer with some vampire tendencies. Interesting fact, he was... The people who got him were a team, get this, a Roman Catholic priest and a voodoo priest teamed up to catch this guy. And apparently they caught him. So that was pretty interesting. The very famous Elizabeth Bathory, she apparently would bathe in the blood of virgins. And then obviously, probably the most famous, and I have a feeling this is going to come up with JT and his discussion, Vlad III, otherwise known as Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad Dracula from the 1400s. Then there's some others, but I just wanted to say there are some real life examples of some very violent people who try to embody the quote unquote vampire that we know of. Is this modern day depiction of vampires actually what vampires really were in the past? Where did this legend come from? Where did it start? Were they always these blood drinking monsters? Were they these killers and rapists?
Some of the first mentions of vampires come from, actually, Russia, or more specifically, Ukraine. There were these creatures called the Upir. They were bloodthirsty beasts with iron-like teeth. Like their teeth were like iron. They would prey on children first. Then the parents.
Oh no.
Some say that they would actually eat the hearts of their victims. And here's the weird thing too, is that they were not creatures of the night, because they were known to roam between noon and midnight.
Wow, that's interesting.
To destroy a Upir, you had to attach a string to one of their buttons and then let them take that string back to their lair. You follow the string back to their lair, and then you had to douse them with holy water and stake them through the heart. But only once. If you stake them twice, they could come back to life.
Weird.
Really? That's funny.
I just have a comment that I even want to make to your original question, which is something like, where do we think that we got our modern day
vampire? And does it match where they came from in history?
Well, I think it sounds like it's an amalgamation of these different kinds of vampires from the
Exactly.
Olympians.
I agree.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. You know, that's quite a bit of reaction to these Upir. Like, you would tie a string around them and then track them to their lair and then stake them, but definitely don't do it twice. Don't go crazy.
Tie a string around a button and get them to eat the button.
Oh, the button. So then my question is, and again, this might be better for after JT's done, but what do we think the modern explanation is for these Upir? We were talking about children dying first, then the parents, hearts being eaten, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Do we think maybe there was an actual serial killer running around way back in the day, or was there some other explanation for where that came from? I feel like there's always a grain of truth. There's always something.
Well, I mean, it's just the legends from the area. They're 11th century stories, basically. And they were not what we consider vampires to be. They were a corpse-like being described as having pale skin, red eyes, long claws, and sharp fangs. A person became a upir through specific circumstances, such as dying without repentance, an unnatural death, or being a sorcerer or witch.
Do you know what this reminds me of?
What?
Skinwalkers.
Oh, yeah.
Actually.
There's upayor is another word. To become an upayor, you actually had to kill yourself.
Oh.
And you actually had to have a specific gene passed down from your relatives. If you had that gene and then you killed yourself, you became an upayor, and they're said to have come from a version of witch, and I don't remember, but the origins of all of these are basically a fear of undead people.
That kind of reminds me of Hemlock Grove.
That's exactly what Hemlock Grove is based on.
Oh, really? About the old
Yes.
myths. Oh.
Uh-huh. So if you go to the Hemlock Grove wiki, that was one of the things that came up in my search. They kind of talk about the background, but they're more talking about the background of the vampires in the show. But they're actually upir or obr or opir vampires. Again, they were ones that had to kill themselves to become this. And they were very violent and bloodthirsty. But in the show, their mouths actually could unstretch unnaturally, like
Ew.
really big.
Like a snake?
Yeah, kind of like a snake opens its mouth really big. But that's for the show. I don't know if that was actually, I couldn't find anything in older versions for that to be true. I think that was just part of the show. I also wanted to talk about the Noxerher from Germany. So this is another person that if they died from suicide or an accident or disease, these Noxerher in German folklore, the way they became this was by actually eating themselves in their grave.
Ugh.
So if you went to their grave and you heard a specific noise, then you knew, oh my gosh, they're eating themselves, then they are becoming Noxerher. But then people started getting freaked out by it. And so when they buried these people, they would decapitate them and make sure their eyes were closed, because I guess that sometimes somebody exhumed a body or something and the people had their eyes open. They were holding their thumb in the other hand, like they had eaten their thumb off, and they were holding it in their other hand, but their eyes were open. And so to stop themselves, they would have to chop off their head before they were buried.
Ugh.
And then the other thing that Cameron talked about is bricks or stones in the mouth. They would put a brick or a stone in their mouth so they wouldn't be able to eat themselves. In 2006, there was a grave from the 1500s where a woman was found with a brick in her mouth. A lot of this ties to the diseases of the day that they couldn't explain. Like tuberculosis was one specifically, because when you had advanced tuberculosis, you're coughing up blood.
And you get emaciated, and yeah.
People could really look like a vampire because they start to pale out really bad,
Yeah.
cough up blood. All of this leads to, as going through history in that area of Eastern Europe, people started to romanticize the vampire. Have you guys heard of the Great Vampire Epidemic?
No.
From 1725 to 1755. It was a period of mass hysteria in Eastern Europe where people thought that there were actually vampires. And there's a story. It began with a Serbian peasant named Peter Blagojevich, and he was thought to have returned as a vampire after his death to terrorize his community. Supposedly, Peter knocked on his own front door, who was answered by his astonished son, who was still grieving his dad's death. And Peter demanded food, which shocked his son, and his son brought him some food, and he devoured it. And then the next night, Peter returned again, asking for food, but this time his son refused him. And Peter left and his son went to bed, but then he never woke up. His son died that night. I couldn't find any mention of how he died or why he died, but this is what started this epidemic. There was so much pressure by the town because people thought that this Peter was a vampire, so they wanted to exhume his body. So because of this thing that happened, the town leader decided, okay, we're gonna exhume his body. And I don't know really how much time actually passed between his death and exhuming his body, but when they exhumed his body, they found that he had no signs of decomposition, and his fingernails and his hair had grown longer.
Which has a lot of commonalities to mine.
That's kind of what started this mass hysteria and the great vampire epidemic. This was more in the Slavic countries, and after that great vampire epidemic, that's when poems or stories of vampires started to come out, writings. There was the German poems, The Vampire in 1748 and The Bride of Corinth in 1797. And these poems all led to what we would call the modern vampire, or Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, Bram Stoker's Dracula is also said to be based on Vlad II, Dracul, or Vlad the Impaler. And he was born in Transylvania in 1431.
That was a long time ago, guys. It was like 600 years ago.
It was a long time ago. What's funny about this, or what's interesting, not necessarily funny, is he was a part of the Order of the Dragon. And it had been created for the defense of Christian Europe by King Sigismund of Hungary. So Vlad the Impaler was actually a defender of Christians, but he was such a fierce person in battle because he killed so many people. He was just known as Vlad the Impaler. He had just all kinds of crazy stories about him because he was so feared. He was rumored to drink blood, but they actually did studies of proteins found on the paper of Vlad's letters, and they distinctly lacked any animal food protein, suggesting Vlad was a vegetarian.
No way! What?
Yeah, so this whole story of vampires and the modern vampire that we have today is based on a guy that didn't actually drink blood, probably didn't even eat meat, was probably a vegetarian, but just a fierce warrior. That led to the stories, and then Bram Stoker's version of Dracula is a much more refined and kind of sexy version of a vampire. And there are other stories of that in history where people talk about being attacked, but it was a sexual thing. I've watched several times the movie that they made with Gary Oldman. That whole story just kind of spawned the version of vampires we know today. This suave, debonair, I'm going to suck your blood type of vampire. And just over time, we as a people have romanticized these. And it's just kind of been a progression over the centuries of stories that started as really disgusting, evil, nasty beasts.
Because they were part of it. The Great Vampire Wars is a lead-in to mine. The Strigoi came about from the late 1500s to the early 1600s. Romania was primarily where they were from. Strigoi is Latin strix, meaning screech owl or night bird, and it was a term for a blood-drinking spirit that stole vitality from the living. There were two different kinds. The Strigoi V, the living ones, which cursed the souls who left their bodies at night to drain others, and the Strigoi Morti, the dead ones, the reanimated corpse feeding on blood or life force. If you were born Strigoi, you had a tail or red hair. Sorry, redheads.
They are the worst.
By being the seventh child
Just kidding.
of the same sex, or by dying unbaptized.
Being the what? Oldest child of the same
The
sex?
seventh child.
Oh, seventh child.
The
Seventh child of the same gender.
Okay. So if you had a house all of girls and the seventh one is also a girl, that's a strigoi.
You're gonna look at that one funny. Yeah.
Okay. But if it was like a boy and the seventh child and all the rest were girls, then we're good.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Animals could also trigger it. So if a cat or dog jumped over a corpse, it was at risk of creating a strigoi, the strigoi morti. They were a lot like skinwalkers. To bring your point, they were known to shapeshift. They could shapeshift into animals, cats, wolves, bats, or screeching owls. And they would appear and they would feed on luck, health, vitality, or blood. But not just blood. And so they were commonly detected by digging up the corpse, and then if the body was still fresh, that's when you would take preventative measures. You would take an iron stake, put it through their hearts, sprinkle them with holy water, and burn them if you found out that the body was still fresh, or if they had traces of blood on their mouth. Garlic, this is where that came from. You would rub it on your doorways to try to ward them away. Hawthorn branches laid across the threshold, iron needles driven into the coffin lid, because iron is kind of a thing to ward off spirits back then. You can see that in like Supernatural.
Yeah, I love that show.
Coin, stone, or brick used to block the feeding. That's where you would jam that right into their mouth, and you would typically see that they would knock out the teeth. That was to prevent them on feeding on family members or whoever was unfortunate enough to get in their way. The cures that I found were not ever actually cures. You would cut the tendons at the knees so they couldn't walk, bury them face down so that way if they did reanimate, they would dig deeper instead of up. Or you would restake them if it didn't take the first time at a crossroads to scatter their spirits in the four directions. And then as far as the Great Vampire Epidemic, it was amongst the Upir and a couple of others, the Vampire and the Strigoi, Mori, and Upir. It was depending on the dialect of the area, but this kind of all went off at the same time. Makes you wonder if something actually happened there.
Exactly, right? It's all rooted in something. The hysteria starts from something. Even the Salem witch trial, which was madness, started because something actually happened. It wasn't witches, we know now, but I'm just curious. I wonder what it was that happened. I wonder what the trigger was that started the hysteria.
People said that they started seeing bodies not decayed appearing in people's homes, or their family members suddenly coming down with illness. So it might have been that there was just an epidemic, and it was being put off because they, like you said, when you're closer to death, you sometimes start seeing loved ones. Maybe this was a natural stage of dying.
Oh, and they were just seeing visitation from deceased family members, but they were thinking that they were still living and coming and preying on them. Like maybe a witness was like, oh my God, mom is here? Shit, she died 10 years ago. This is bad news. She must be a vampire. Is that what you're thinking? That's actually a really cool theory.
That's what I'm kind of thinking.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they would dig up these corpses and then they would find out that they were fresh.
Oh. That is interesting.
The reason why people think that happened is because they were buried in colder months. And they were not decaying at the same rate as other bodies might be expected to.
Okay.
Oh yeah, if you're dying of illness, it was probably in the colder time.
Yeah, true. And rabies is one of the things that people think may have been one of the biggest causes of people thinking that people were turning into monsters. It makes you hydrophobic. You don't want to eat. You get really crazy, and it is infected by biting vampires.
So you get violent and start biting people. Yeah, that's a really good explanation.
Possibly. Well, like we've all kind of touched on it.
I found that too, yeah.
There's a number of potential causes, but I think rabies is one of the ones that people really are like, that's probably a good one that might have been happening.
Well, back when diseases, had epidemics like the plague, the different ones, people thought that vampires were the ones spreading those diseases around.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. So they flipped the causation of it.
Mm-hmm.
So did you want to talk about any of the real-life possible vampires? I thought you already did that.
Well, mine are real-life murderers who think are vampiric. But there is one guy I kind of wanted to talk about. This one is pretty mysterious, and he's all over. Like, people talk about him a lot when they talk about, could he be a real actual vampire? His name is Jacques St Germaine, the Count of St Germaine. And this guy supposedly potentially lived for hundreds of years. Like, it's a strange situation. So I just want to talk about him because it's compelling. So Count Claude Louis Robert de Saint Germaine was possibly born before 1710 and may have continued to live for many decades past his reported date of death of February 27th, 1784. So reportedly, he died at the age of 74. However, there is historical documentation of people who are writing about him and talking about him for more than 100 years of lifespan. So even though we can document he was 74 years old at the time that he died, there are people up to what would have been his 100th birthday talking about how they were chatting with him and he was a young man. So it's a very interesting case. The essence of the myth is basically that he was very old but looked very young. He had some unknown origin and parentage. He's pretty much kind of came up out of nowhere. He came without letters of introduction, which would have been a typical thing that you would have needed when you're moving about in high society at that time. You needed people to vouch for you to verify your identity. But he still fit in and moved freely in aristocratic circles. He had impeccable manners. He was never really known to eat or drink in company. He could speak a large number of languages. He played the violin like a virtuoso. He had an extraordinary memory and knowledge such that he would talk about historical events and times as if he had been there himself. He was a great storyteller and talked about things as if he had actually been there. He was also supposed to have been a master alchemist who would create unique dyes, paints, remove flaws from diamonds, and increase the size of pearls. He is a documented man. So there is known to be this count who lived from 1710 to 1784. He died while the master of the estate was away. And this guy was under the care of somebody else. And so there is room for, like, he wasn't there for the burial. He didn't actually see the man die. So there's a lot of speculation. Did this guy actually die when he was at that estate? Or was that a cover story so that he could reinvent himself and continue his long, immortal life? Because then, despite the fact that supposedly he died in 1784 during the French Revolution, he shows up again in Louisiana, of all places.
And then JT shared a story about him.
JT did?
Mm-hmm. In the Louisiana episode.
Oh, yeah, you did. That's right. I forgot. Mm-hmm. That's what made me remember him. Because in Louisiana is when he really earned the possibility that he could be a vampire because of this one particular thing that happened. He actually shows up on 1039 Royal Street, and he goes by the name of St. Germaine. He was cavalier. He was a ladies' man. He was very charming. He's the storyteller. He talks about knowing people. Even though he doesn't have letters of introduction, he's just so suave. He fits right in, and he's immediately a star of the socialite society in New Orleans. He would host these really lavish parties, and they had really amazing cuisine, fine wine, and entertainment. Everybody really wanted a chance to be with him, to converse with him, because he was such an epic storyteller, and he was so delightful to be around. Oftentimes, partygoers would end up feeling a little bit confused because he would talk about events which had occurred hundreds of years in the past in precise detail as though he himself were there. So not long after his arrival, he claimed that he was a direct descendant of the Count of St Germaine, who was the first gentleman that I told you about, who supposedly died in 1784. And he even would have pictures. This is my so-and-so grandfather or whatever. And he looked a lot like him. So people were skeptical, but it was difficult to refute because he did actually look like this guy. In fact, it was said it was uncanny. Eagle-eyed guests noted that portraits never depicted the Comte as older than 40 years old, which is the same age as the Jacques St Germaine of New Orleans himself. They started to spread, initially in jest, that he may in fact be that gentleman, and he was somehow rendered himself immortal and ageless. Jacques enjoyed this mystery and played it up. Maybe it is me. Maybe I am immortal. Even though he catered these parties, which were highly celebrated and lavish, he himself never ate. Again, very much like the original Comte de St Germaine. Several months after he had been in New Orleans, police were called to his home to investigate the circumstances leading to a woman who had fallen from his gallery. And this is the story that JT had told. She was rumored to have been a prostitute and had leapt from the balcony, according to bystanders who said that they had been there. But originally he had said that she had fallen. People in the street surrounded her and tended to her needs while help was being rounded up. Hysterical, still alive after suffering this big fall, the woman ranted that she had jumped because she needed to escape this man, St. Germaine, who had bitten her neck. She screamed and sobbed about her story, claiming that she was only able to escape when he was distracted by a really loud knocking on his door. The woman was taken to the hospital as soon as possible, and the police, suspecting that she had become delusional, told the very well-known, affluent, and respected St. Germaine not to bother coming in for questioning at this late of the hour, but rather, go ahead and come visit the police station in the morning and we'll go over it, right? Well, he never showed up. So he completely vanished. He was gone. He left all of his belongings behind. So then they start searching the house. Legend has it that upon breaking into his house, the police discovered on the second floor a series of open but corked wine bottles. And on closer investigation, they discovered this collection of wine bottles were all filled with human blood. And this Jacques St. Germaine was never seen again. But there have been other times where people have shown up claiming to be this guy, or that people have pointed out, this looks like this gentleman, the Comte de St. Germaine. There's actually more details about him. I kind of really glossed through it for time, but it's really interesting how and why that could have happened. And do we think maybe he was a real vampire?
I'm sold. He was Strigoi.
He was a Strigoi.
Well, and again, I think that's just based on regionality. I think they are describing the same thing. Think about the vampire epidemic. There were several places that reported basically the same thing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
What if he's a survivor? When was St. Germaine? Because the vampire epidemic was 18th century.
The stories about him put him in New Orleans around 1902. And the Comte de St Germaine died in 1784.
So he was right there. It was 1725 to 1750 was when the vampire epidemics were happening. And then here comes Comte de St Germaine.
That's actually really fascinating. And it also was supposedly during the French Revolution. So there was a lot of unrest. There was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of social movement and change. Who knows? Maybe this could be the guy. So he disappears in 1784. Supposedly he dies. People talk about as if they were still having conversations and meeting with him for up to 100 years of this guy's supposed life. So maybe up to 30 years after he died. And then 100 years after that, he is seen supposedly, or at least somebody going by that same name, Jacques St. Germaine, in New Orleans. And that guy tries to bite a lady on the neck and supposedly has wine bottles full of blood. So he's a pretty interesting case study.
Bet he doesn't show that picture again.
True. I bet he doesn't. He probably learned a lesson from that, I would hope.
No, he probably just visited somebody with the first name of Anne, told her his story.
Maybe.
What am I not getting?
Anne Rice.
Anne Rice.
Oh, okay.
Now that's how he does it now. He doesn't show a picture anymore. No. Creates an entire book series.
So something that I was just trying to figure out is where did the shape-shifting side of vampires come from? Turning into a bat, turning into a werewolf.
That was Strigoi. Yeah,
That's the Strigoi?
they believed it was these cursed people that were alive, or if they died and had something happen to their corpse, they would become Strigoi as well. They were able to shapeshift.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why it is speculated that Bram Stoker was inspired in developing the character. Amongst all those other things, obviously those definitely went into it. The suave, romanticized characters blended with these more monstrous creatures that had all of these powers that could shapeshift, right? Dracula turns into a wolf. He turns into... I really only remember him turning into a wolf and like a weird monster thing in the movie. I'd never read the book.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't show him turn into a bat, but remember there were some scenes where it was him flying.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's supposed to be presumed that he turned into a bat.
And he had a close association with rats and stuff. He could command the vermin and other darker creatures.
Totes.
Well, there was other vampires in other parts of the world too. Like the Philippines have the Manananggal, a winged beast with fangs that can separate its upper torso from its lower body.
Weird. Cool.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That was the Philippines?
Yes. China has the Jiangshai, a vampire that hops around with outstretched arms and sucks people's life force during the night, while by day they hide in the dark places such as caves or coffins. And then there's also a link to the Egyptian gods, too. To me, it's kind of loose, but there are people that say that the oldest vampire is Sekhmet.
Oh.
Well, and the biggest reason why is because Sekhmet was kind of the god of war, and she was bloodthirsty. She was the daughter of the sun god Ra, but she was so out of control, she needed to be stopped. She began slaughtering the humans and drinking their blood without showing any signs of stopping. So he turned a big lake into a red beer that she drank and got drunk. And this is how they were able to subdue her and to stop her from killing all of humanity.
Yikes.
Egyptians nowadays will actually add pomegranate juice to beer to honor, or it's the annual feast of Hathor and Sekhmet because of that story.
There's legends about pomegranate, too, that you're not supposed to eat it because it'll bring you closer to death.
Oh, I didn't know that.
What about white pomegranate?
Actually, I think it's just the red.
So we have all of this amalgamation of all of these old ideas and stories and events in history and things that we've seen, and it comes together in this one beautiful archetype of Dracula. And then history is born, and now we have all of these other like pop representations. What is vampirism now, these days? What do we see? If I remember correctly, there are several different groups of people who identify as being vampires.
I think it's a lot of fanfare. Have you heard of the Vampire Masquerade?
No.
No.
It was a form of D&D that went specifically into vampires.
I think I have heard of that.
People started doing LARP for that. And then some of them started living as if they were vampires. Some of the ones that were a little bit easier to suggest started actually drinking blood. And so that's a lot of what we see today.
Is it, Abby?
They're called Sanquinarians. And they believe that they need to drink the blood of humans in order to be healthy and vital. So that's a thing. There are people who literally, they will find a willing donor and using a hobby scalpel, make an incision and drink the blood from their consensual donor.
What is a hobby? I'm Googling this right now.
I don't know. It's just a disposable scalpel, you know? But that's what the BBC article, People Who Drink Blood, that's what they called it, a hobby.
It looks like a surgical scalpel, kind of.
Well, yeah, it's a scalpel. I'm sure it does. I wouldn't imagine it. I just imagine like a plastic version.
Yeah. I mean, it just looks like It looks like a scalpel with, you can remove the sharp piece and like screw on a new, like a box cutter kind of, except in the shape of a scalpel.
Okay,
Interesting.
yeah. So it's a way to have a disposable, sterile scalpel. So these sanguinarians, as I understand, the good ones, they will go through a really thorough process of vetting the donor before there's any sort of process of blood drinking. They all do STD tests, make sure everybody cannot transmit any sort of gross disease, make sure that they're all like on the up and up, and then they do their business. And if you're a really smart sanguinarian, you become a nurse or a phlebotomist or somebody who knows how to actually draw blood, and you can take the blood from your donor, your willing donor, and you can store it in your fridge.
Wow.
And
so
drink it
people
later
do
and
that?
not have to have a person. People do this, yeah.
Dang.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Never going to look at phlebotomists the same again.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of crossover.
Fair. I'm curious to know, are they exclusively eating blood, or is it like they feel like they need it as a supplement?
Normal food as well as blood. In fact, according to this article, according to the person who acted as a sort of spokesperson of sanguinarians in this article that was written back in 2015, she claimed that a lot of them, if they can go to a doctor and get a real diagnosis and get some other sort of treatment and or not do this and feel okay, that they would. And that a lot of them will actually try just not doing it, thinking maybe it is psychosomatic. The more reasonable ones, let's say, I didn't read a lot of articles about the kinds who are just like, nope, I need to do this and I'm not going to explore anything else. I didn't read about those guys, but in the case of the ones that we may call more reasonable, they have explored the possibility that it's psychosomatic, and they will try to fast from drinking blood. And a lot of them experience things like digestion issues and weakness and headaches. And when they don't do it, one of them said it had been 4 months that they were able to go without drinking blood before they just couldn't anymore. And they felt awful. And once they did it again, they felt better. And so...
Sounds like withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
It does.
But by 4 months, though, you would think they'd be completely detoxed. And perhaps, what if maybe there was some other thing going on in their diet or their life that was causing them these things, and they're owing it to the blood? But I did read one doctor said that drinking blood is known for being a laxative, and it is nutritive. So it makes sense that people who are having these symptoms will feel better.
Yeah.
That it's not that crazy, but, you know, it's just so outside of the boundaries of social norms that it is crazy, right?
I wonder...
Have they been tested for iron deficiency or anything like
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm just wondering if there's something about the blood itself that makes it better bioavailable in the gut so that they are getting those nutrients in an easier way. Like, I'm wondering why. I'm willing to agree, okay, there are some reasonable people out there who are genuinely probably not wanting to drink blood, who are looking for other options, right? And maybe truly, if they just do feel better with blood, maybe this is an explanation why. Maybe there's something about it that makes it easier for them to get the nutrients more quickly. That's really interesting.
That's possible.
I wonder if people's blood might taste different depending on where they eat.
It does.
Actually, yeah. I bet it does.
Really? Tell
like
me.
McDonald's versus In-N-Out versus, a really good steak from a steakhouse.
I bet. I don't know about that per se, but this article really covered it all. Because after the person drank the guy's blood, they complained that it didn't taste the way that they like, or it was too metallic-y or not metallic-y enough or something. And he was kind of like, oh, boo, that sucks to learn your blood doesn't taste good.
Oh my God.
Some of them do have a preference to what blood type they drink, too.
That's the next question I was going to ask. Yeah. Is there a difference between types?
I think so, but I don't know that deeply about it. I read this article. I read a couple other forums. I did read quite a few Reddit. I read a Reddit post that said, what's the deal? Do we think vampires are real? And there were a number of people who were like, yes, I'm one, blah, blah, blah. And there was one of them who said that in their family, they drink blood, and this person has been fed blood by their mother since as long as they can remember. And blah, 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 blah. And so immediately I was like, wow, this person's a crackpot. That's a cool story that they made up. But then after learning about the Sanquinarians, I was like, or
Might be true.
is their family, sanguinarian? Just put it next to vegetarianism. We've all got our like versions of what we do. I don't know. There was one kid who got into sanguinarianism he was wrestling with his cousin too hard, and somebody drew blood, and it got in his lips and his mouth, and he didn't even realize he felt sick, but drinking it made him feel better, and then he got a craving for it, and they get cravings for the blood, just like vampires. And so these people don't necessarily want to live in the shadow of vampires because of the stigma of vampires and the stigma of being considered crazy for feeling like you need this. And so there is some concern. JT is miming, gagging over there. There is some concern that because of the negative stigma, some of these people don't feel comfortable going to clinical settings to have their situation investigated. So that's a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem.
But anyway, then there's also, I guess this will have to be a topic for another episode, and maybe could be a whole episode, but the other versions of modern vampires are lifestyle vampires, which are more like they're into the aesthetic and the creatures of the night and the blah, 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 living their life a certain way.
Which is a fair
then
point.
Then there's the
Which is a fair point. I think that there can be the sanguinary that you were talking about, and then the mentally ill people that just got carried away in a LARP, essentially. It could be two different things.
Yes. And then there's the sadomasochists, people who drink blood for their sexual fancies. Then there's the energy vampires, which we did not get around to talking about, but it has come up a billion times on this show. Mm-hmm. And I feel like somebody talked about how excited they were to talk about that at the beginning of this episode, and we haven't even gotten there. And then, to Cameron's point about the LARPing, I also have quite a bit of information about a girl who got sucked into an Anne Rice vampire cult for like a decade.
Pardon the pun?
Oh. Yep, sucked into. Good call.
On a daily basis, she was talking to people who were like, no, I'm a vampire. Let me prove it to you. And they would go out of their way to manipulate the people in this forum online, in this community that they created, into believing that they were vampires, going as far as basically catfishing the real people in the group by pretending to be other people that they had gone and proven their powers to, and they were like, oh my God, I saw it. I saw it in real life. Hi, my name is Jim, and I saw Nancy disappear right in front of my face. Kind of weird stuff.
Crazy.
It's a whole saga, and it sounds juicier than I just sold it as, but it is crazy. It's crazy. And, and those aren't even people who believe they're vampires. They just want other people to believe they're vampires for the attention and the power and the control. So there's lots of layers to that one. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of different categories of people who may identify as vampire or may be labeled as vampire.
All right.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good one.
I'm just speechless. It's just gross.
There's something about it.
I'll eat a bloody steak.
Yeah.
I will.
But it's steak.
Yeah.
I've eaten cow's blood, but it was boiled, and coagulated with cinnamon in it, and it was like they called it blood bread.
Oh, I don't go that far, but...
That sounds terrible.
I didn't know what I was eating until after I ate it.
You do. Gross.
Eat a bloody steak, and I will have a craving for that.
But the steak's still cooked, right? It's just very juicy.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Real quick, I want to show you guys this real quick. Okay. So this is The Count de St Germaine. This is like supposedly the original Count. And he's kind of got an interesting, very youthful face. He's got a really rounded face with kind of oversized eyes, aquiline nose, and he's kind of got a distinctive face. And I just kept thinking, I feel like I've seen this guy before.
He does. He looks very familiar.
He's got a funny little face. If you get rid of the wig and replace it with normal hair, like I feel I've seen him. And then I was messing around on Facebook that same day, and then I saw this guy. And I'm curious your opinions.
Who the hell's that?
This is Tyler Warwick, and he is one of the like top hoa 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 meme guys. He does a mean Jasper. And I saw his face, and I was like, oh my God, this is the face. This is the one that I couldn't figure out. Is this the guy? There's some similarities, guys. There's some similarities.
Oh my gosh, the eyes.
The freaking eyes. The nose, that little mouth. He's got that cute, very youthful face. I think it's him. I think he's put himself back in the limelight.
In the vampires, too. In a forum to make fun of them.
Yes. It's freaking him.
Hiding
So I just
in
wanted some
plain
confirmation. He is. Well, because no one talks about St. Germaine probably who watches Twilight. But I just happened to, on accident, because I do find his memes pretty funny, to like have him pop up on my feed. And I was like, holy shit, I just saw this face, except with a white freaking wig. So
you should put those side by side and then do one of those memes where it's like those who don't know and those who know that meme.
I'm gonna. I think it's him, guys. It's him.
If he does get wind of that and decides to play into it, he's going to get a wig. That'd be amazing.
No, that would be hilarious.
Anyway, I found him. Saint Germain's still alive.
All the way back from the great vampire epidemic.
Yeah.
Still walking around.
Pretending like he's an Australian.
All right, so today we follow the lineage of the Germaine family, also known as the one real-life confirmed vampire.
The true immortal being.
Still around now, and hoa, 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 hoa. So we've talked about vampires. I think there's definitely more to talk about, and I think that the one thing that ties each of our segments together is actually probably St. Germaine. He kind of fits every single one of what we talked about, including modern-day vampires, my Strigoi, his Upir, your modern-day killers. You know, he fits so well into everything that we've talked about. I think that would be the big takeaway here is his story, and I think that there could be more to talk about, maybe not specifically about him, but there is a lot that we didn't cover. Like, for instance, the Morai, when they first were starting to call them vampire. Well, there's a lot of things that we can still cover, and I think we should. We should come back to this again at some point. But I think St. Germaine kind of stole the show here. That was a good one.
Tyler Warwick, please don't sue us. We are not saying that you're a killer. Thank you, sorry.
That we know of.
If you are interested, go back and listen to Sleep Demon versus Vampire episode back in season 1. Is that episode 1?
Episode 2.
Trigger warning. There's some sexual assault discussed in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
But go listen to Sleep Demon versus Vampire, everybody. Now, Cameron, back to you.
All right. So that has been another episode of
The
Wandering
Crow. It's hard to lead it, isn't it?